Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Know and Follow podcast. This week we have one that I'm really excited about. I sat down with Paul Hoffman. Paul Hoffman and his family are missionaries to Bolivia. If you attend our 11 o'clock service, they are the giant family that sits in the front right corner of the sanctuary. We had a great conversation about the work they do in Bolivia, and I left it feeling truly inspired. So I hope you have the same experience. And without further ado, here's Paul.
All right, Paul, thanks so much for popping in. Appreciate it. And you and your wife and your family, you are a missionary family. But let's talk a little bit about that. What is the ministry you guys do? And I guess, how do you do it?
Sure. Well, it's good to be here, Addison. It's good to chat with you beforehand, learning more about what you're doing and kind of in the digital, reaching out to people and presenting them with what Jesus is doing, and what he wants to do with all of us. We serve in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. And so it's kind of a tropical lowlands context, and we founded and still direct a children's home for kids that have serious, usually medical special needs, and who are abandoned by their parents, and so they don't have any place to go. We got involved with that, adopting one of our sons 17 years ago, and he was really complicated. And we didn't even know that he was going to survive. And so we prayed and said, gosh, God, is this going to go anywhere? And we were shocked that in 6 weeks, he, from a place where he couldn't lift his head and had several severe malformations. And, he got up on all fours in that, as you, as a father, know, that kind of involuntary, I know I'm going to crawl. I don't really know why I'm doing this, but I have to kind of impulse situation. And I mean, he's a healthy, athletic, smart, good character guy today.
Wow.
And we were shocked to see that. And then we started to say, well, what about other kids that are really complicated and that are in a place like he was in? And the home that he was in was, it was the place where special kids went, but they had 16 kids in a room the size of your office here, Addison. And, the policy was don't pick anybody up, because they'll cry. They'll want to be picked up then, right? These are all kids under one, by the way.
Jeez.
16 kids under one. 2 ladies attending. They've handed the bottles out to the kids sorry, I got a Spanish term, en horario, at a certain time of the day. They would get, not because you were hungry, no special kind of dietary anything. Really nice, 80-year-old Brazilian nuns running the thing, but they weren't able to do everything, Right. And so the care was horrible, really just almost criminal, almost kind of,
Sounds like the most efficient possible setup, but not the most helpful or not the most, borderline abusive, Right.
in the treatment of the kids. So kids that were healthy could survive that, and I'm sure were badly traumatized and have, suffered real damage to their lives, but can make it through. But kids that were, had real meaningful special needs couldn't get surgeries they needed, couldn't gain weight, and I'm sure passed away for lack of real care. And so, we just were moved by that. How could this be okay? And so we really felt at that point that we needed to do something about it. We had kind of the awareness about it, and so so we started thinking, that we'd have 4 or 6 babies in our backyard, and that we would love them well, and they would all get well and be adopted, and that kind of thing.
Right.
And many of them have been adopted, actually, and many of them did get well. But, currently we have 19 kids in the home, all of whom have very significant disabilities or, I'm thinking right now, for example, there's a little boy named Jesus who's having surgery on Thursday this week, but he was born without any eyes. And the result of that means he doesn't hear or see. And so he's, a pretty complicated guy. He's completely physically able. So he's all over the place feeling and touching and climbing things. And they work with him, one of our young ladies has learned haptic sign. So it's a touch sign language. So they're on the shoulder, touching him in certain ways that he now knows they mean certain things. So there's been a whole training, learning process on our part and then on his part, so that there's an ability to communicate.
Wow.
And he's going to have surgery on Thursday to give him some amount of hearing.
Right.
Which will be the first sounds he ever hears. So
will that be cochlear
or? It's just at the level of the tympanum right now. They don't do those kind of implants in Bolivia. These are visiting American surgeons that are going to do it, but because of the way everything is formed differently in there just isn't a canal for sound to go through. So they're going to kind of open that up and graft a tympanum on there and hopefully permit some audio registration on his part. So we're excited about that.
Wow.
But he's one of our 19, and we're I mean, we love it. It's a lot of work, but
Yeah.
it's good work. It's the kind of work I think that Jesus has called us to do.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about your calling to this. It sounds like you were already in Bolivia upon this adoption. So was the calling first to missions, and then in the midst of missions, this calling to care for children?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we felt called to Bolivia, and we did some church planting down there and pastored a church. And I had a brief stint, directing an English language university down there, which was for me an evangelistic move, and for the person behind that university was a way to unethically obtain money from wealthy people in town.
Make some coin, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I didn't do that for more than a year, but we were doing the church thing, and there are, the interesting thing about Bolivia and especially Santa Cruz is there are, in the last, say, 40 years, there are a large number of evangelical churches are there. I don't know that very many of them are very healthy, but it's a different time than it was, even 50 years ago. We have a friend down there who would talk about going with her grandmother at night for a silent prayer meeting in the town of Oruro City, and it had to be quiet, and it had to be at night because they would be stoned if people caught them being evangelicals. And so that part of the culture has changed a lot, certainly in the part that we live in. So there's a lot of churches, but the churches haven't, in general, figured out that it's not just about reading the words in the book, it's about doing the things that the words tell you to do. So there's a lot of emphasis on staying away from sin and meeting maybe 5-6 times a week to kind of keep people busy so they're not getting into trouble. But there isn't a lot about, doing the works of Jesus, which I think is really central, right? Faith is something that you do.
Right.
It's not something that you just hold in your, somewhere in your brain. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I think so let me ask this. Non-evangelical churches being what's legal, was the government previously Catholic? Am I guessing correct there?
Yeah. The official religion of the country was Roman Catholicism until about maybe 15 years ago. There was a constitutional change that made it kind of a secular state.
Okay. And so the piece that's actually striking me is how hard it is for us as Americans to imagine a place without what we call kind of a social safety net. Talk about that a little bit. What was shocking about that piece?
Well, what's shocking for me now is that right now we're here, and I've got, we have a large family, as you know, and so we're getting all kinds of medical needs met that we have put off for many years so we could have a chance to be here and get them taken care of. It's the abundance of availability, the special classrooms, the surgeries, the follow-up, the government-provided insurance for people with certain incomes like us. It's amazing. And yeah, when you contrast that with what's available in Bolivia, it's shocking. I mean, there just isn't just even foster care, which, in this context, people are like, oh, what a bummer, you're in foster care. When you compare that, that's not as good as being in your own family, even being loved there, but it's way better than being in some massive congregate facility. Imagine, 200 teenage boys living together, and the way that breaks down because no one really wants to be involved. And, so yeah, it's amazing how shockingly little there is there. My kids still say, how come there aren't any dogs running around on the street?
Right.
Just real basic things. Or if you have a kid with a special need, you need to go to the public hospital. So you go 3:00 in the morning, you wait in the rain, at 8 o'clock they open the doors, and when you get to your part to, let's say you need neurology, and they're like, oh yeah, so the neurologists are on strike today. So come back in 2 months.
Wow. Because
only that often do they open up a chance to set an appointment to see someone in your specialty. So the system is almost set up to, it's not set up this way, but the results of that kind of low level of service is that if you have a special needs kid, the incentives are all in the area of abandonment, because your whole life has to center around getting really poor care for your kid. And the schools, the nature, only recently have special education schools developed, and they're quite frankly very poor. The level of expertise, the commitment, it's just very, the contrast is incredibly stark.
Yeah, and these aren't wealthy individuals with these kids.
Right.
It's to go to a hospital at 3 a.m, you lose a work day, you lose
exactly.
There's a practical cost, and I'm not saying great job abandoning your child, but it's
right.
It's easy to imagine why that would be so difficult, and I think eye-opening for us to think, because I often think about, you mentioned being in this area, even it's not apples to apples, but when we went down to Kentucky, I needed an urgent care because I got pink eye, right? And it was like finding an urgent care in Appalachia, Kentucky was impossible. They were like, go to the emergency room, it's an hour away, and I was like, huh. And ever since that, it was eye-opening to me of how blessed we are to live in the Northeast. And I think sometimes it can feel frustrating. It's a helpful reminder because it can feel frustrating of this specialist, that specialist. But when you zoom out for a minute, you go, man, we have Hershey Medical, we have CHOP in Philly, we have Nemours in Delaware, we have Johns Hopkins in the Baltimore area. And we are truly blessed in this area to have such access to medicine. I think your story undercuts that of like, as hard as it can feel to parent a child with special needs, we can be thankful that we have these established things. We have the availability of resources for the most part, and it really is incredible.
Yeah, it is. It is a huge blessing, and you're exactly right. It means like losing a day's work, and when you're a person living on the margins, there a day's work is your day's food. You're calling to mind for me. We have an adopted daughter with Down syndrome. When she was abandoned by her mother, we knew the mother in this case, and we said to her, listen, we will help you. We can help you with finances. We can help you look after her. We can help you get medical needs taken care of. You can take care of your daughter. And she was like, look, I sell things off a blanket in the market. So she's going to get up, right? I won't be able to teach her to like sit all the time. She'll get up and get run over. Like it was as simple as that. And while we continued to try to encourage her, it was really a stark situation. Like, wow, that's really, she didn't have God in her life to know that God could help her figure that out. But from her limited perspective, that made total sense.
Yeah.
Calculus
checked out.
Yeah. Like she was really thinking in her own distorted way about the well-being of her child.
Yeah. So what does day-to-day ministry look like for you guys in Bolivia? So you're running this, is it called an orphanage? Is it called
we call it a children's home.
Children's home. Okay, you're running a children's home. The goal to get these children self-sufficient. I'll let you describe it. Like what does ministry look like week to week, day to day?
Sure. I mean, we have a team that serves with us in the home. So it's a total of about 25, 26 people. We try to have one substitute mom caring for 3 kids at a time. And then we're doing, some kids go out to school. We have a little blind girl who lost her eyes in acts of violence in her family and is intellectually sound. So she goes to school, and we have a woman who accompanies her and translates the written material into Braille with a Braille machine, and then she reads the Braille, and then she does her homework in Braille, and then they translate it back to written. So she's been able to be mainstreamed by that effort on the part of our team. It's everything from, doctor's appointments with friends of ours who don't charge the children's home and give good care to them, to dealing with systems that don't want to help, to a lot of diaper changing. We have a stimulation classroom, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. We have 2 physical therapists that come in the morning and afternoon because all of our kids have, not all of our kids, almost all of our kids have very significant needs for those kinds of services.
Wow.
So it's mayhem, it's insanity, it's it's emergencies. We were on the phone on Saturday, like, oh my gosh, Adriana's gastric button popped out. The balloon that holds it into her stomach blew up, and I'm on the phone here in the U.S. saying like, okay, so you need to get a Foley catheter right away. What's a Foley catheter? No, there's supposed to be instructions down there. There's a box. It's green on top of the shelf behind the supervisor's area. Right. Just this kind of, no day is like another.
Right.
But there is that, the part that's continuous is the unceasing demand and need and appropriate area to respond for us with love to the kids' needs. Most of the kids we have, I would say all but one, are going to be with us for the duration. I don't think that anybody's going to go off on their own and be able to survive. Maybe 2. Their just needs are so great. We have kids that are quadriplegic and are fed through buttons in their bellies, or kids who are just so profoundly neurologically damaged. There's, little Jonathan is a boy who his family was struck by lightning in the mountains of Potosi. And he survived along with a sister, but the rest of the family was killed. And he suffered, probably was autistic prior to that, but then he suffered additional neurological damage and vision problems and all kinds of difficulties. So, yeah, we're aware that we're really going to have them for as long as they live.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like I need to say you're a hero. What you guys are doing is absolutely incredible.
Addison, it just points up how good Jesus is, because when for me, reflecting on it, the truth is that this is how Jesus, to him, we look like that, for me, I can present good on the outside, before I knew the Lord, I behaved appropriately, and yet inside, with all the arrogance and the pride and the bitterness and whatever else is in there, I was no less handicapped than these guys to the Lord. He didn't call me into this because I was good or because I had something to offer. Right. I'm effectively Francisca, who is totally paralyzed and needs to be fed through her belly, right? God has all this grace for me in the total kind of handicapped, malformed, unable self that I present, and says, "Hey, let me give you something special to do."
Right.
And I will be there with you and every step, because you're not able to do it at all.
Right. What I love about your story too is you're called into what God has called you to as you go along. It's not this. You didn't see the whole path. You couldn't have.
Not at all. Yeah. No. Right. It's true.
That's neat. That God has called you into this work, and that you're filling this need. And I think it also. I'm going to misquote the verse if I try to pull it, but Paul has this time in one of the letters where he says, "Against these things there is no law." And I think there is no atheist, agnostic, deconstructing person who could listen to what you guys do and say, yeah, that's not who Jesus is. It's so totally who Jesus is. You know what I mean? It's
yeah. And I'll tell you, it's funny you say that, because for me, as a guy with a pastoral background and a real passion for evangelism, the way that it has opened doors for us, as opposed to pastoring a church, has been incredible. I mean, I've spoken in comedy clubs, interrupting a lot of raunchy humor to talk about Jesus, and the thing gets quiet, and I get to speak to government officials and all sorts of people. We had a situation anyway. We had a situation with a judge where I had an opportunity to pray with her in her chambers. She was being accused of corruption. She's a judge who actually is the reason I'm the director of the home, because she accused my wife falsely, as my wife was calling out something that was wrong in the system in an adoption. And she was saying, "Hey, this is wrong. We didn't know that the people on the judge's team were the ones doing the wrong." And so she said, "All right, we're going to put you in jail," to my wife. And so I became the director of the home, so that if someone was going to have to go to jail, it'd be me and not her. A couple years down the line, I'm in the office, I'm praying with this same judge. Now she's being falsely accused and breaking down, and the Holy Spirit shows up profoundly in her office. We are now close friends. She follows the Lord as a judge, which is really tricky down there. Yes, doing what Jesus does has enabled me to preach to all kinds of people that would never have listened to us before.
Right. So talk a little bit about what's harder than what you expected, what's easier than what you expected, what's kind of the life. Also, you guys are in the States now. What's kind of the goal for this this chunk of time?
Sure.
Yeah. What does the future hold?
So that's a lot of questions all in one. That's very unfair.
Easier and harder.
That's okay.
Let's do that.
So so something that's easier is that people want to hear about why we're doing what we're doing. It's something to be, a family of 15 at the market, winding through stalls and buying, give me the whole box of apples, give me the one with 200 in it, kind of a thing. Right. That stands out. But right there is a conversation what these kids are all different colors, or someone will say to me, guys, it's always a guy, they'll say to me hey, how can you love someone about our adopted kids? How can you love someone that isn't your blood? And I'm like, wait, did you marry your sister? That's really creepy,
Right.
Where are you coming from? So, just that real natural way that witness happens, to God's goodness is special. And I don't know that I knew I certainly didn't know that was going to be that way.
Right. And then harder than you expected?
Harder than we expected. So we had a situation, Addison, where a number of years ago, where we suffered violent attacks repeatedly in our house by it's not something that we well understand. People went to jail for this, though not everybody. And we just never thought, in a place where people were throwing these kids away, like never, I didn't budget at all for any kind of meaningful resistance to that, Like in the spiritual, in the exhaustion, absolutely. But I never considered that
people would be against it.
that people would be against that. Yeah, that we'd be targeted as a result of doing something that, like you say, who could say that's a bad idea, right? Whatever they believe, no one could really say it's a bad idea or a wrong thing to do. But we did have that experience, and it really, for me, there's a passage in one of the gospel verses, Jesus went about doing good and undoing the works of the evil one, or I can't remember what the verb is there, but that is something that we're doing. We're undoing the works of the evil one. Abandonment and sickness, those are not things that God invented. They're things that come about as results of sin. And so, yeah, to find that kind of spiritual battle would come out in such a very, very harmful physical way was a surprise for sure. A difficulty I did not foresee happening.
Wow. Yeah, that's, I can only imagine there's this piece, I'm sure that for you guys, even on your faith journey, there's a piece where you go, hey, God, come on here.
Yeah, right. How could this possibly happen, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's right. That's
and then your time in the States, like you're currently at our Millersville Mission House, and what's the goal of your time up here, and kind of what does, I assume you're going back to Bolivia at some point. What does that look like?
So, the goal is really for medical care for our kids. A little bit of trauma recovery from what we experienced is in there as well. But we have 14 kids living in our house with us right now. And maybe all but 2 of them have something meaningful that needs to happen in their health. And so we spend a lot of time in Delaware, down at Nemours. And it is. It is. And so yeah, that's really the goal. We have a lot of surgeries a few that have gotten done. We got 2 coming up this week. And then kind of, every month to come, 1 or 2 coming up here. So yeah, so we just want to get our kids healthy in the areas that can't be touched very well down in Bolivia.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And then are you speaking at churches during this time, or is it just purely, are you doing what would be called like normal itinerancy stuff, or is it mostly just the medical side? Yeah,
it's mostly the medical stuff. It's, we're really enjoying being part of GCC. We're astonished at the reception and the openness and the way that people care about our kids. And I mean, really, we didn't know anybody who was part of this church, except we had exchanged a couple emails with Brandy starting like 5 years ago about the house, because some other missionary friends of ours had been there, and they said, hey, these are great people. And so we visited the church, and, the first Sunday we came, it was full. We weren't even on Bolivia time, but we weren't on showing up early time. Lancaster, I don't know if that's Lancaster time or what that is, but
I think it's unique to Grace Community
Church.
Oh,
is it? Okay.
I've worked here 9 years, and I'm not sure I've adjusted. So
okay, gotcha. That's helpful for me with limited experience back in the States here. But yeah, so we came at 11 or maybe 11:05, and there wasn't a seat in the house. We went upstairs. There wasn't anything on the balcony. They were going to put us in an overflow room. My wife says to me, like, I'm not going to watch TV. I can do that at home, right? And I'm like, well, let's give them a minute. And so Paul grabs us, and he takes us downstairs in front of the sign language interpreters. I've got 3 deaf daughters. I'm like, this is incredible. This is ordained by God for us to be here and for our girls to see the signs. And it was, that was the beginning of a long series that's continuing of astounding God setups for our family.
Yeah, the cool part of that story, too, is that the ladies who are running that sign language thing really took it on as a passion project. Took it on as, we want to provide this. We're willing to put the work in. If we don't, and what we've heard from the deaf community is that they don't want fly-by-night interpretation things. They want to know that it's going to stick. So we kind of had really sunk our teeth in and said, okay, we're just going to do this for
as long as it takes, right?
As long as it takes. And then you guys show up, and now you can look over there on a Sunday in the 11. And there's several people signing together, and I think there's something, I don't know, there's something really beautiful about it that I can't put the way God has orchestrated, like them doing it, and then you guys showing up, and then we had the sign language class a couple weeks ago. It's incredible, and it's a blessing for sure. So the future of the ministry in Bolivia, what does that look like for you guys?
So that's a good question. I'm glad you followed up with it. So we have a leadership team down there that's doing a really good job, and we have worked for years to have people accept responsibility in the way that this group is. And
These are Bolivians?
These are Bolivians. Yep. The entire team is Bolivians. There is a missionary kid, but she was born in Bolivia to British parents, and she's grown up. She has a brother who's adopted from our home, and so this is all part of her. But yeah, these young ladies have really given of themselves in a way that is just exactly how it's supposed to be. The turning themselves over and working hard and sweating. They really have borne this burden with us and are doing it without us being physically present. So we're really impressed and thankful for that, and that's just a work of God. And the whole team is good, and you see that sacrifice, but these ladies are doing it at a level that makes them makes it very natural to say these are people who are, like we call them responsables in Spanish. They are responsible. They are shouldering up the weight for this. So they're doing really well. Being here has caused us to really do some good thinking about we need to change the way that we do what we do almost entirely, in the sense that while our home is small and we have tons of people involved, it is not healthy for a child to have one person caring for them in the morning, another person in the afternoon, another person at night, and then 3 different people doing that the next days, just depending on how the scheduling goes and what's happening. And so we before we left, we did a trial. We started a pilot foster care program. A little baby that had lived in our house for a few months before we came to the States is with a family that's part of our team and one of our responsables, one of our leaders there. She and her husband have him in the house, and they are going to ask for guardianship for him. So they've told me. And so that's exciting. But that's the kind of care that anybody needs, and certainly these kids all the more because of their physical challenges. And of course, it'll be even harder to make it work, but I think we can have roaming physical therapists and roaming stimulation people that are going house to house, and probably some respite, help as well. But I think we need to make that shift, and it's going to be enormous and difficult. But from this end, we're saying, okay, that clearly needs to happen, and that'll change the whole model of what we're doing. Whether we then end up having other places where we're, seeding this same kind of idea, because we get calls from all over the country to say, hey, we've got this kid, complicated kids come to us. We're always full. Our house is pretty full now too. For many years we were saying, well, we'll take them into our house, right? So we've adopted all those kids, and so we're pretty full. So whether, getting them out in the community with people who love Jesus and love children, whether that's going to be able to absorb more kids, or whether we'd have to do that in another city to be able to help those things happen, I'm open to either one of those things. Another thing that we want to be doing is supporting families that have not abandoned their special needs kids, knowing how difficult it is, knowing that we have contacts with good doctors who care about disabled kids and would want to help, and being able to make those connections and shepherd those families and pray with them, because it's really a heavy thing, to have to adjust this. And it's not a culture it's a culture that's more likely to say you did something wrong, and that's why you have a kid who's paralyzed or whatever it might be. So there's a number of, so there's the fundamental, I think, change of the model of care that we have for the kids. And then there's also expansion that's to come.
Yeah, I know I'm going a little long here, but what do you need in terms of, we don't have a ton of people listening, about 80 or 100, whatever, but, if somebody's listening, what are you looking for in terms of people for maybe short-term trips to come down and help, whether that's, I'll let you answer that. What types of professionals maybe would be very valuable?
Sure. In terms of people that come with skills, PT, OT, nurses, just people who love kids really is helpful. The truth is, when you look at the face of our team who are working so hard and really doing it and really knowing that they're doing what God wants them to do, it still means so much when someone comes from a place like this that they know, as far as they know, is paradise. This is heaven up here, right? The United States. Someone comes from there and then voluntarily spends money to do what they do and loves it. Is so ministers to them, like, oh, I am doing something good. Like, it kind of dispels those clouds that begin to creep in their minds.
Right.
And so really just people who love children is more than enough of a skill.
Right.
you
Wow.
know, to come down and be a blessing to us. Yeah.
Right. And how can people give to what you guys are doing, stuff like that? I mean, I didn't know. I mean, I know I'm springing that on you. I don't know if you have a website set up or whatever. But.
Well, we're in the process of getting a website set up,
Okay.
and I'm just slow at responding to Avery, who's trying to help me do it.
Oh, yeah.
But we are on Facebook, Casa de los Preciosos, and I could maybe give you some. There's a church in New Jersey that processes donations for the children's home,
Okay.
And that certainly is helpful. You know, it's a fundamental part of what we're doing. It's not our emphasis, just because when we pray and get nervous about things, God kind of always says to us, like, I got it.
Right.
You know, so God motivates people to give. We don't do any kind of campaigning or, you know, we just really have our hands full with what we're doing. But God does provide that way. And we really, you know, what we ask people for more routinely is prayer. We really need, it's a real battle. It's a battle to renew yourself. It's a battle not to give into tiredness. It's a battle for our moms at the home, for example. In their churches, they want them to be doing the tambourine ministry or, you know, things that fit into building the church as an institution. And I understand that. But to ignore like actual missionary work being done by your young women and say, but how come you're not, you know, in the tambourine ministry, and I'm using a real example, and to be like angry with someone and say like, you're going to be on church discipline because you're making wrong choices by serving handicapped orphans, is just wrongheaded. So, so just to pray for, you know, for our team as a whole and for the children in the home, like I mentioned, Jesus with his surgery coming up, those are huge things. There's just continual medical issues to be resolved and a need for that grace to kind of just be poured out over the whole situation.
Right. So praying for the team, praying for the children, praying for, you know, just the vision that you guys are working on. Anything else that you're saying, please be praying in this area.
Yeah, for our family as we kind of process through the trauma of the violence that we experienced and just that we could, you know, it takes forever to get appointments up here too. And so, you know, we're trying to cram it all in the time that we have and, you know, for them to be successful, whether that's a heart surgery that's coming up or the 2 surgeries you have this week, which is a bowel and a feeding button. Just that, that we feel strongly that God is saying, I can handle this. I'm going to order this out, and just that we would trust that that's going to happen and that it would actually come about.
Absolutely. Well, Paul, thank you. Anything we didn't get to that you want to chat about? Or
No, thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
it's a pleasure.
Well, thank you, man. It was a joy, and we'll definitely talk more as, you know, pleasure to know you, and I imagine we're going to be getting updates from you guys kind of regularly as time goes on. So
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Know and Follow podcast. This podcast is a production of Grace Community Church of Willow Street, located at 212 Peach Bottom Road in Willow Street, Pennsylvania. If you're looking for a place to worship, we'd love to have you join us. Our services are Saturdays at 6 p.m., Sundays at 8, 9:15, and 11 a.m. This podcast is hosted, produced, and edited by Pastor Addison Roberts, the digital pastor of Grace Community Church. You can learn more about our church at gccws.net. Our theme music is Only the Brave Run Wild by Sounds Like Sander. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.